Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, an Israeli soldier is shot in the West Bank. Israeli scientists may have the key to treating brain disorders, and a tiny Israeli baby survives the impossible. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. An IDF soldier has been shot while guarding a group of religious Jews visiting Joseph's tomb in the West Bank. The shots were fired at the entrance of the Balata refugee camp early this morning, which is located just a few blocks away from the holy site. The injured soldier was evacuated to an Israeli hospital for moderate wounds and is currently in stable condition. Local Palestinian residents from the area also threw rocks and Molotov cocktails at Israeli security officials in the area, and the forces responded with riot dispersal tactics so that the visitors were able to continue their prayers as planned. Every month, the Israeli border police oversee pilgrimages to Joseph's tomb, and this morning about 16 buses full of visitors entered the Nablus area to visit the holy site. As a result, the IDF bars Israeli citizens from entering the area without authorization, even though the biblical Jewish patriarch is believed to be buried in the tomb. Palestinians regularly attack the Jewish visitors at the holy site with rocks, firebombs, and burning tires, but gunfire is relatively uncommon. This incident comes just a week after dozens of members of the Bratslav Hasidic sect visited the holy site without an army escort, and were detained by the IDF after being attacked by Palestinian rioters. It's fair to say that in Israel, Muslims and Jews don't always agree, but when it comes to burkinis, there's some shared confusion. As the French government pushes to ban full-body swimsuits throughout the Mediterranean coast, Israeli Jews and Muslims just can't seem to get it. Several mayors in French beach towns have attempted to ban burkinis, claiming they're determined to stop Islam-compliant swimwear appearing in public. But now France's highest administrative court has ruled against banning the full-body swimsuits. Meanwhile, here in Tel Aviv, Israel's beaches are full of Muslim women frolicking in the water in the controversial swimwear, and the Israeli government certainly doesn't have a problem with it.
فحسب ما سمعت يعني إن في أوروبا وهيك يعني هاي حرية شخصية، أنا بدي ألبس بس بدي ألبس يعني إذا أنا حابة ألبس مسطر ليش ما ألبس مسطر؟
In Israel, there may be profound ideological differences between the Jewish and Muslim population, but it's never come down to banning clothing on the basis of religion.
I think it's very funny that people think they are so liberal and open can't stand other religions and feelings of other people.
هو عموما في إسرائيل يعني إسرائيل ما في أي تشددات أو أي تسكير من ناحية اللبس أو المظهر العام.
In Israel, Muslim women aren't the only women wearing full-body swimsuits. The ultra-Orthodox Jewish population enjoys a seaside in full garb, only they have to go to segregated beaches that alternate bathing days for men and women. France's move against burkinis follows a series of deadly attacks by Islamist militants, which has left the country on edge. While Israelis can sympathize with the need to tighten security, beachgoers are urging France to stay focused on the real issue.
I think in France it's a little bit, it's looked like a big problem right now. So they have to deal with the real thing, not with the burkini and all these things in the beach. So women can wear anything they want. And you don't have to feel not comfortable if they're wearing something they believe that they should wear.
وأنا بعتقد إنه بحكي للرسالة للبنات اللي إنه عن جد بنحروا على هيك أشياء إنه أنت ما تردي وحاولوا قد ما تقدروا يعني انجوا للبرامج ممكن مظاهرات ممكن يعملوا هيك كثير أشياء فإنه حاولوا يمنعوا ما يردوا عليهم شو ما يكون.
As we get closer and closer to the U.S. elections, debate on which candidate is better for Israel is heating up. Times of Israel editor David Horvitz sat down with ILTV's Steve Leibowitz to explain why Clinton's appeal in Israel is growing.
David Horvitz, editor-in-chief and founder of Times of Israel. Thanks for being with us today.
Sure.
Donald Trump is no more popular in the United States than he was when he got the Republican nomination, surely, perhaps even less so. The polls are showing that we're probably heading towards a Clinton victory. Here in Israel, it seems as though the anti-Hillary feeling that might have been strong some time ago, some 6 months ago or so, a year ago, before the primaries started, is waning. And maybe, do you think that most people in Israel are sort of hoping for a Hillary presidency because it's the one you know as opposed to the unknown?
I don't know, I think it's fluctuating a bit. I've seen opinion polls that had, if Israelis were voting, that we prefer Hillary, but I know there was a poll in which Trump came out ahead. I think Israelis like the sort of no-holds-barred support for Israel that they sometimes hear from Trump, which contrasts to the sort of conditional sentiments that they've heard for some time from the Obama administration, in which Clinton played a role. What I think has happened, though, also is in the same way that even in America, people who were more open-minded towards a Trump presidency, I think as time has gone by, he gradually sort of alienated increasing sectors of the electorate. I think maybe something similar has happened here. I mean, it's not our election, and therefore Israelis are looking at, what impact would it have for us, and how reliable is this person, and what is it, and what do we think of sort of his gut instincts and so on. And there I suspect there's probably been a bit of a decline. But in the same way that I think it was foolish for people to write him off as a player at all and then as a candidate, and he was never going to be the nominee. Yeah, I agree with you. The polls show Clinton ahead, but there's a ways to go. And we in Israel, especially, I think, given the experience of 20 years ago, most relevantly. I mean, the last election also a lot of people got it wrong. But 20 years ago, Shimon Peres was, of course, going to win the election. Rabin had been assassinated. I mean, Netanyahu was a toxic candidate. And then there was a spate of 4 terrorist attacks in 10 days, in February, March. And by the time we got to the elections, Netanyahu just, narrowly won. But outside forces can remake politics, apart from the things that happen in the campaign. And therefore, I think it's a very foolish person. There's only 2 candidates. He shouldn't be writing off one of them.
So you don't count out the possibility of a Trump presidency?
I don't think anyone sensible should count it out. Things can happen, and things that are predictable. Maybe the candidate does something outrageous or outrageously, good. But also those outside forces, can remake politics. And like I say, in Israel, we know that very directly, but in the rest of the world, I mean, things happen that change the way things are perceived.
Bill Clinton was a very popular president for us here in Israel. Hillary was a senator in New York, a big Jewish state, and she was pretty popular and known as a person who was supportive of Israel. She fought against anti-Israel elements that were trying to push their way into the Democratic platform. Why is Hillary not more popular in Israel?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that she isn't. I don't think she's, spectacularly unpopular. I think the more, generalizing terribly and crudely here, the further you move to the right, the more dismayed or upset you've been by aspects of the Obama administration policy on Israel, the more you would instinctively have looked, well, who's coming in from the other side this time? I think that's part of it. I mean, for some people, depending on their politics in Israel, she was seen as an enforcer or a fixer or a dutiful minister under a president, certainly on the Iran deal, on attitudes to the risks Israel can or cannot afford to take with regards to the Palestinians. There are a lot of Israelis who feel that the Obama administration didn't get it. And I would stress, I don't think it's a partisan thing. I mean, you say Israelis liked her husband. Really, they did, because there was a sense of empathy. I think Israelis liked George Bush Jr. as well. The question, I think it's questions of empathy and the degree to which presidents and administrations are deemed by Israelis to understand the reality of this region. And I think after 2 terms where for a lot of Israelis, the Obama administration was not deemed to have truly internalized the brutal realities of this region, there was a natural inclination to see, well, who's available from the other side. And I think if the Republicans had run a more consensual candidate, I think if Mitt Romney or John McCain were running this time, probably the balance in Israeli surveys would have been more strongly pro-Republican.
It's very rare that you, as an editor of an Israeli publication, would take a very strong position on an election in another country. Why, in this case, did you speak out so strongly?
Well, look, the Times of Israel, it's not unusual for Israeli publications to take strong positions. The Times of Israel, does not, we're not allied with any political party in Israel or anywhere else. We're an independent publication. I wrote a piece that it included in it some pretty strong criticisms of Trump, because I think there are moments in history when one needs to take a stand, and I think he's a candidate who one should certainly not be endorsing. I think some of his positions are beyond unpalatable, and I wanted to say it. That was me writing an op-ed with my byline on it.
David Horvitz, Editor-in-Chief, Times of Israel, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
Thank you.
It may sound like science fiction, but it's true. Israeli researchers have just created mind-controlled nanobots that have the potential to treat a full realm of challenging brain disorders. These microscopic robots were invented by a team from Bar-Ilan University and the Interdisciplinary Center at Herzliya. The Israeli scientists developed a hollow shell-like structure out of a kind of DNA origami, which takes on 2- and 3-dimensional shapes that can be filled with a pharmacy of different medications. Physicians would then use electromagnets to activate a time-release process to heighten the drug's effectiveness. The researchers also say, and this is incredible, that they conducted trials showing the release process can also be controlled using human brainwaves. In the not-too-distant future, it looks like this first-of-its-kind nanobot will be used to treat patients suffering from epilepsy, depression, attention deficit disorders, and even schizophrenia, conditions that until now have been terribly difficult to diagnose and treat. The nanobot technology is just one of the latest scientific medical advancements to emerge from Israel. And now a warm welcome to Rabbi Tuvia Aronson, who will guide us through this week's Torah portion. Thanks so much for coming in.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Natasha. Thank you for having me, and hello to all the viewers out there.
So to begin, why don't you tell us about our weekly parasha?
Okay, so we're in Parashat Re'eh in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy. And it starts off with one of the most evocative verses, I think, in the whole Torah. It says, Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha v'klala. It says Re'eh. The parasha is called See. It gives us a new vision of our lives. It gives us a new perspective, a new take on what our mission is here in this world, what we're supposed to do in our time here. It says Re'eh anochi. It means see that I am giving you, but there's a Hasidic reinterpretation. Re'eh anochi, see the I. Know who you really are. Know why you are here. What's your purpose? What's your mission? What are you supposed to accomplish here? Noten lifnechem hayom. I'm giving to you today. It's about being present. If you want to know your purpose in this world, you have to be very focused on where you are right now. That doesn't mean forget the past or the future. Rav Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, he said, those who are deeply connected to their past and passionately yearn for the future allow great light to enter into their souls in the present. It's a beautiful line that I think reflects that we have to be in the moment, but using the past as fuel to develop visions for the future. Now, Rabbi Nachman says, Hayom im bekolot tishma'u, we say it every Friday night in our Kabbalat Shabbat. It's in Psalms 95. If you want to hear the voice of God speaking to you, it has to be Hayom, in the moment. It has to be in the moment. So it's to visualize our lives in the present moment, and then Bracha, blessing. And then it gets to the blessing. What is a blessing? There's a few interpretations. One is that a bracha is about bonding and connecting to the divinity. That means to actualize godliness in our lives. Rabbi David Aaron has a nice phrase. He says, we're not only supposed to spiritualize the material, we're supposed to materialize the spiritual. We're supposed to manifest our values and our ethics in our lives. That's one interpretation. Bracha meaning dveikut, bonding, connecting. Another one is, bracha is hamshacha, lehavrich, to graft or to bring down a branch. In other words, to bridge heaven and earth. One more is Bracha, is in the first blessing of the entire Torah, is for the fish to expand and to move out. So what we're supposed to do to create blessing in this world is to expand our spiritual reach in life. And when,
Well, my question for you is, what is the big message that we see from this week's parasha?
So I'll get to the rest of the parasha, but I think this introduction is really crucial. The word bracha, if we use the first mention in the Torah as the center of meaning of the word, it means to expand. So what we have in this parasha is, until now in Dvarim, we had a very big picture relationship with God issues that Moshe is giving to the people. And after 7 verses in this parasha, it begins with detailed, specific mitzvot. For the majority of the book of Dvarim, we're talking about action, bringing the values and the connection into action. And the first thing it mentions is Yerushalayim, having a central place. You believe in one God, that's great. But now actualize that by having a place where you all focus to in your prayers. When we face Jerusalem, when we pray, what we're doing is we're enacting our belief in unity, in ultimate unity, by creating unity in our focus of our prayers, and by excluding other spaces and other idolatrous worship that creates fragmentation in our beliefs. And then it moves on to a series of mitzvot. For example, tzedakah, giving of charity in this week's parasha. And in this week's portion, by the way, it says the word bracha, I think 12 times, the root of bracha. And also with giving tzedakah. When we give charity, we're actualizing our belief that this world deserves to be a righteous, just, tzedek, justice-filled environment. What we're saying is I'm not just giving you a gift when I give tzedakah. I'm creating unity in this world between the giver and the receiver. I'm creating bond. I'm creating new blessing. And in fact, then we move on towards the end of the parasha to the holidays, and when the entire people is supposed to pilgrim together, to journey together as one, creating unity and blessing.
So, we're soon going to be approaching the month Elul. Can you tell us about this month?
Absolutely. I think it's really perfectly designed that we always read this parasha on the cusp of Elul. So Elul, this last month of the year before Rosh Hashanah, is a time for perspective, for connecting our minds, our eyes, re'eh, and our hearts in a way that creates a new reality in our own lives and in the life of the world around us. What do I mean by that? I mean that when we approach this end of the year, not only can we collect all of the good points of light, all the blessings, all the mitzvot, all the tzedakah, all the unity and the bonding and the connection that we've created in the past year, we create a vessel in this month to receive all the blessing, all the bracha from the previous year. And then that creates fuel for the future. You see, when you have a vessel, usually when it's full, if you put any more in it, it spills out. But spiritual vessels just constantly expand with us. And when we reflect on this past year, and we say, what happened this year? How did I impact the world? What is my place in this world? Not only do we do self-reflection, it actually builds fuel for growth and change. Rosh Hashanah, Shana is the year, but it also is Shinui. How do I change my perspective? How do I get more precise in my eyes, re'iyah, re'eh, the parasha? How do I see myself in this world in a more precise way? How do I create more blessing in my life and life around me? Now, usually we say that the month of Elul, ani lidodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. And for anybody who's engaged or on the cusp of a new marriage, it's talking about ani lidodi v'dodi li. The month of Elul is about connecting and bonding between lovers. But it also has another abbreviation, Elul. Et levavcha ve'et levav zarecha. Elul, your hearts and the hearts of your children. So it's about connection with our lovers, our connection with our children, and ish l're'ehu v'matanot lev yonim. Elul, about friends and connecting with friends. You see, when we want to create intimacy in this world, the month of Elul is about creating new intimacy. When we create new intimacy, it's sometimes easier with people beyond our circle, our immediate circle. You know, I'm riding on the train on the way here, and I saw some people, and part of me says, okay, give them their space, I'll take my space, but why not smile, create a new bond? It's easier sometimes than reflecting on the intimacy I have in my own immediate circle, with my spouse, with my children, with my friends. And so this month is about reflecting on not only my place in this world, but my place vis-a-vis my close relationships. How do I make my relationships even more renewed, more energetic, more loving and giving, bonding, connecting? And ultimately, that will lead us towards Shana Tova U'Mituka, a beautiful, sweet new year that's coming up.
Yeah, well, I think that's something that we all need to focus on doing. Thank you so much for coming in, Rabbi.
No, it's a pleasure. And Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov to you and all the viewers.
Shabbat Shalom. It looks like politics aren't impacting users' decisions when it comes to downloading games. And now an Israeli product is becoming a big hit in the Arab world. Pirate Kings is so popular that it just officially became one of the most successful smartphone games ever designed in the Jewish state. It was made by a Tel Aviv company called Jelly Button Games and recently crossed the 70 million player threshold. The game is also enjoyed here in Israel and abroad, but guess who's paying the most to play? Users from Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. So here's to technology breaking political barriers. Happy gaming, everybody. Israel is celebrating because the youngest ever premature baby to be born in the country has survived. Little Aharon was born after only 22 weeks in the womb with only a small chance of survival, but a miscalculation by his doctors ended up saving his life. Baby Aharon came into the world in April weighing a mere 670 grams. When he was born, doctors told his father there was only a 20% chance he would survive, and if he were to survive, he would face a 90% chance of developing disabilities. It turns out those odds were overly optimistic because doctors miscalculated and thought Aharon was actually 23 weeks old at delivery. The odds for a baby born at 22 weeks are effectively 0%, and in Israel, current hospital policy orders to not intensively treat babies born at 22 weeks or earlier. So if doctors had gotten his age right when he was born, he wouldn't be alive today, because a hospital wouldn't have even brought a neonatal expert to the delivery room. Luckily, they did, and remarkably, baby Aharon was released from the hospital on Tuesday healthy and happy. His parents will have to monitor his future development closely because the survival of a baby born at this stage is extremely rare globally. So, kol hakavod to baby Aharon, he's already a true fighter. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. It's important to keep your head up and your heart strong, so today's word is nitzol, or survivor. When life gives you something that makes you feel afraid, life is also giving you a chance to be brave. And here in Israel, that's certainly the case. The Jewish state is full of nitzolim, or survivors, from around the world, whether they've made it through the Holocaust, a local war, or a difficult period. Just take a look at 22-week-old Israeli baby Aharon, who survived a premature birth and became a nitzol against all odds. Strength doesn't just come from physical capacity, it comes from an invincible will and lots of inspiration. And we're positive that you'll find some if you come and visit Israel. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. The weekend is finally here. Friday is expected to be sunny with a high of 87 degrees. The steamy weather should stay out through Saturday, but there should be some relief with some partial clouds. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.78 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our next update at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.